Good morning. My name is Maureen McCarthy. I am the program director for the National Security Forum of Nevada, and I am here with Mr. Jim McDonnell. Jim is the strategy advisor to MSTS, which is Mission Support and Test Services, for the Nevada National Security Site. I can almost get used to saying that, Jim.
Right.
So with that, I am going to turn it over to Jim to give you a little introduction to our topic for today, which is what happens when bad guys get nukes.
Hey, good morning.
Jim.
Thanks, Maureen. Good morning to everybody. As Maureen said, my name is Jim McDonnell. I'm in Las Vegas working at the Nevada National Security Site. Like Maureen, I have a hard time saying that sometimes because we worked together for a long time on this, and it was called the Nevada Test Site for decades before they changed the name. So I tend to refer to it as the test site, and I have to catch myself sometimes. So we're going to have a chat today about, or when I get to see you next week, about the threats to our nation due to weapons of mass destruction, specifically nuclear threats. And I thought it might give you a good idea to tell you about why I was asked to do this chat with you. So many of you are history students, so I'll start my interaction with the government's role in preventing nuclear terrorism. In 1992, I was in a SEAL team. I was a bomb disposal officer in a team that was designed to go into hostile environments and rescue hostages. And I was called into an office by a Special Forces general. And he said, "What are you going to do about this loose nuke stuff?" And I said, "Whoa, okay." I usually had a pretty good time with my job. I jumped out of airplanes. I was a deep sea diver. We did all kinds of fun stuff. I worked with explosives. One of the less fun things was taking bombs apart. But all of a sudden, I was tasked with figuring out what to do if, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, a nuke got in the hands of terrorists and we had to go take it away from them. So that was in 1992. And at that time, the nuclear stockpile of the two countries was very large. There were tens of thousands of nuclear devices in the custody of the United States and the Soviet Union. And both countries had absolute control of those systems. When the Soviet Union collapsed and Eastern Europe started to collapse, and what became known as the former Soviet Union, the concern about the spread of this material and the proliferation of the knowledge became a really, really big deal for our country. So as you can imagine, a nuclear device blowing up in the United States would be catastrophic, to the tune of hundreds of thousands of casualties. So it's something that's just absolutely unacceptable. So for the last 30 years or so, there's been a relatively small group of Americans working on understanding where this material is going, how it's being moved, how can we track it. A little known fact is that all of the ports where containers come off the ships into the United States, every single one of those containers goes through a radiation detector to see if there's nuclear material in there. Now, the question becomes, what if there is nuclear material in there? What do you do about it? You have to call somebody. So that's where the DOE and the National Nuclear Security Administration come into it, because the national laboratories, including the Nevada National Security Site, is where the expertise lies for understanding what that threat might be. So for example, you take that container, comes into the Port of Houston, comes off a ship, and an alarm rings off. The Border Patrol officer or the customs officer that does an inspection may or may not be able to figure out what's in there. If they can't, that data is actually digitized, transmitted to Nevada, to the site here, and then off to our national laboratories where nuclear weapons scientists can look at the information and analyze it and determine if it's really a threat or not. And the reason I say that is a lot of material that comes into the country is perfectly legal that has radiation signatures, and medical isotopes are used to treat people. So something may cause an alarm to go off that's perfectly safe, but the challenge is to understand what isn't safe. So we have what we call a defense in-depth strategy, where we have activity outside the United States, where we have the US government has actually invested in detection systems and training for other countries to try to contain material and see it as early as possible. We have maritime search capabilities. We have teams here in Las Vegas that fly fixed wing aircraft and rotary aircraft, helicopters, and can fly over cities and see if there's a radiation signature or not, and transfer that information back down to what's called a home team, and they can do analysis of that material. Now, the interesting part about the SEAL team piece of it, because that's sort of the fun part, was, as I said, we had to be able to jump out of an airplane or dive to get to where we were going. And 20 years ago or 25 years ago, there was a group called NEST, the Nuclear Emergency Support Team, which still exists today. It's just a little different. But in those cases, the scientist would be tasked to go and look at a bomb. And if something was just found in the United States, well, that means they're going to drive up to it. They're going to bring big trucks. They're going to bring all kinds of big equipment, sort of a mobile laboratory approach. Well, if you're in the middle of the night jumping out the back of a helicopter into a pitch black night, you are only jumping with what you can carry. And that includes food, guns, bullets, ammo, and whatever special equipment you need. So we had to spend a lot of time with the laboratories, in particular one here in Las Vegas, a remote sensing lab, on how to take all of that big equipment that the scientists had developed over the years and miniaturize it and ruggedize it so it could jump out of an airplane with you. So it would literally be strapped to my body, and I would jump out and often into the water. So now you're not only jumping out of an airplane with it, but it's got to get wet. And then you may go by boat or swim to the shore and then go find what you're looking for. So it's been a lot of fun. It's been a really interesting career. The best part of it is being able to work with both the operating side and with the scientists. Now that led me to my last job, which was the Assistant Secretary at Homeland Security, the Department of Homeland Security in Washington, as the Assistant Secretary for Countering Weapons of Mass Destruction. Now that's chemical, nuclear, biological, and some explosives. But that job was pretty interesting because it got to cap off a career of being an operator with being the person in Washington writing policy, working with other agencies. For example, the State Department, the Defense Department. It's interesting to say sometimes from a national security perspective that something might be of interest to the United States for national security, but we don't just go into somebody else's country and do something about it unless the diplomats, the State Department are the folks that work with other countries to say, hey, Jim and his team would like to come talk to you. And then we go talk to them, and then we start a dialogue, and then we try to work together. There's the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna, Austria. They do a lot of work. So there's a lot of international diplomacy. There's a lot of White House level meetings in kind of policy, and then trying to figure out how do you work together in a republic like the United States, where there's 56 states and territories, that the federal government assists during an emergency, the federal government does not take over. So I'm going to wind down here because coming up on a minute, but I really look forward to talking to you, and I look forward to your questions. So think about what I said. If anything piques your interest, just ask. It should be fun. We should have a good time talking, and I really look forward to that opportunity. Thanks very much.
Excellent, Jim. Thank you very much. And I know there will be questions. There's a lot of stories right now about Iran and North Korea. So the sort of who are you most worried about in the loose nukes business these days? And of course, I know the students may have lots of questions for you about your background. You've had a phenomenal career, and I look forward to you being able to share your stories and perhaps encourage the next generation of SEALs out there to follow in your footsteps. So
sounds good. Thanks, Maureen.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. And we look forward to seeing you next week for our discussion.
Thank you. Take care.